Welcome to the Bi-Geekly Report, your bi-weekly take on queer representation in geek pop culture. I'm your host, Elle Sanchez. I've been a big comic book fan my whole life. I've been reading comic books since I was a little kid. My dad was a big comic book fan, so he read comic books to me when I was a kid, like to put me to bed at night. And we moved a lot when I was growing up, so my dad used to paint murals in my bedroom to make me feel better about my new room. And one mural he painted was of the Thing busting through the wall, who's like one of my favorite characters of all time. Sadly not queer, but one of the greatest characters ever. And stuff like that. I've always loved comic books a lot. And I used to work at a comic book store for about 4 or 5 years. That was fun. It was a comic book and gaming store. And I used to work the midnight shifts a lot and clean the toilet. So it was great. I enjoyed it quite a bit. But yeah, I've collected comic books most of my life until recently because of financial reasons. But I love comic books. I've been a comic nerd my whole life. I have several comic book related tattoos. I love comic books a lot. If you're also a big comic book fan and you're also queer, both like me, which I assume you are if you're watching this, or maybe not, you don't have to be, but if you are, then you know there's unfortunately not a whole lot of queer comic book characters out there, but a lot more that have been coming out literally in the last so many years. And so there is a decent amount at this point. So we're going to talk about some of my favorites that have existed, not necessarily all that I grew up with, but that are current and that I love. I'm going to start with Batwoman, aka Kane, who was introduced into the Batman comic books in the mid-1950s, oddly enough to dispel the rumor that comic book readers had created at the time that Robin and Batman might be, gay lovers because they're two men that spend so much time together, and they're half naked half the time. Well, Robin is, not Batman, but Batwoman was introduced to be like, oh no, there's a lady, and she's also a superhero. Not sure. But when she was reinvented later on in the early 2000s in the DC Comics by Greg Rucka, her backstory was that she was in the military and was outed as a lesbian, so she was kicked out of the military and then chose to become a masked vigilante after that. Next, I want to talk about one of my favorite DC power couples that exist. I don't really have super strong feelings about either of these characters on their own, but together as a couple, they're so cute. It kills me. It's Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy. I love them together. I've been wanting to see them actually hook up and be a couple since I was a little kid. If you remember, there's a really great episode of Batman, the animated series, in which the two of them kind of commit all these crimes together and become best friends, and it's very cute. It's very Thelma and Louise, but there was always, I felt, and I don't know if I inserted it into the show myself with my own gayness, but I always felt like there was a lot of sexual tension between the two of them, and I just wanted to see this couple finally come together. And they did in the comics, in Harley Quinn's current series, her standalone series for DC right now. In Harley Quinn number 25, they finally kiss, and they're like a couple. I mean, I don't know if it's going to last. I don't know how not toxic the relationship is, but they're so cute together, and I love them as a couple, even though by themselves, not as interesting to me, but together, great. Next, I want to talk about one of the greatest characters that were introduced into comics this year in the Marvel universe. It's America Chavez, who also goes by the title Miss America. She's one of the people that has that moniker because I think the original Miss America was introduced in the 1940s at some point, and it's probably a white lady who I'm pretty sure is straight. But America Chavez is Latinx, although she is from another universe, and I don't know where her ethnicity of origin is that, but she's definitely Latina on some level, and a lesbian, and a kick-ass superhero, and has her own comic book series, which is awesome, and written by, name drop, one of my good friends. Personally, I know her, is Gabby Rivera, who's a very awesome author. You should check out her book, Juliet Takes a Breath. But she writes America Chavez, and the book is amazing, and you should check it out. And there was a cover, if you didn't know, I think it was maybe issue 2, where America Chavez is in a Beyonce formation kind of outfit. It's dope. You should read it. Next, I want to talk about a queer couple that has been together in comic books and a cartoon, but also not so much. It's a little bit of more of like kind of fan fiction than it is exactly canon. And I'm talking about Marceline the Vampire Queen and Princess Bubblegum from Adventure Time. They have been a couple in the past. This has been actually definitely cemented as canon, sort of, by the voice actress Olivia Olson that does the voice for Marceline. She did say at a book signing that the creators told her that they had dated before. So this technically makes the characters, it actually canon for the characters, who I assume are bisexual. But it's not actually shown necessarily in the cartoon or the comic book, although the comic book kind of implies it a little bit more than the cartoon does. But if you're like me and you're weirdly obsessed with these two being a couple, you know it's true. They're in love. They're the cutest couple in all of like comic bookdom, and I love them together so much. And there's just not enough, really adorable hard femme, high femme couples out there. Not in real life. There's tons of those, but I mean in the comic books. And I love them together so much, even if they're not technically or can't be shown together. But we can hope that that will happen in probably the comics before the cartoon, but sometime in the future. But at least we know it's probably canon. Next, I'm just going to do a list really quickly of some honorable mentions. I can't go too far into their background, but you probably know who most of them are. If not, you should look them up. But here's some of my other favorite queer comic book characters. Betty from Rat Queens, Tank Girl from Tank Girl, North Star from the X-Men, Apollo and Midnighter, who are another great, adorable gay couple, and also basically all the characters from Lumberjanes. I'm pretty sure they're all queer, and they're all great. And lastly, my favorite queer character in all of comic books is Renee Montoya, aka The Question from DC. I love Renee Montoya. Not only is she Latina and a lesbian and a cop and also a superhero and just amazing. I love her so much. And not only all those things about her, but I've actually made out with her. We've been in love. That's a factual part of her character canon. That's not true. Not really. Okay, what the story is there is that I love Renee Montoya. I loved her since I got her in Gotham Central sometime in the mid 2000s. At the time I worked at a comic book store, and at the comic book store, the owner just happened to be friends with a certain person who writes for DC. And that guy would come to the comic book store often, and I begged him. I was like, all I need in life for you to write me in this comic, making out with, or maybe making love to, whatever's appropriate, Renee Montoya, or we can just fall in love, or maybe we can just have a conversation. Either way, I want to meet her in my fanfic, but like in real life, in the comic world. And of course I did tell him I would get a tattoo of her if he did that. But the thing is, he did. And I am in a DC comic book series, not as myself, as a white, cis, blonde woman who has my name. But that's another long story. But they did actually use pictures of my face, not my body, but of my face to sort of look like this character. And I don't, but I appreciated it either way. I also don't even go by the name anymore that the character uses. But either way, I'm in the comic book. I'm a very successful sex worker who Renee Montoya falls in love with when she's undercover in a brothel. And I think the character goes on past that comic and then maybe gets killed later in the series. But either way, there are panels of Renee Montoya saying, I love you to me. Not me, but like, essentially it's me, I think. So these are some of my favorite queer characters in comic books. Who are your favorites? Who did I leave out? Who would you like me to mention? You can mention yourself in the comments below. Be sure to like this video, if you liked it, and also share it with your friends or anybody you want to. Subscribe to the channel. I hope you enjoyed it. This has been the Bi-Geekly Report with Jet Space Magazine. I've been Elle Sanchez. Bye.